such a pleasure to be reconnecting with one of the finest CEOs I have seen and experienced in all my career. And very privileged to be hosting you today, KK.
Thank you so much, Mina. It's really a pleasure.
Thank you. To start off, you are at a time in your life's juncture where you have experienced so many different things. And what is one biggest insight you've had thus far?
See, I think that's a very interesting question because many times in life, all of us are at a stage where we need to make a choice and we think in terms of the consequences and sometimes sort of fear don't make the decision which is really right. So the big insight which I have at this juncture today is that it's never too late to start something which you're very passionate about. Because after exiting Mindtree last year in August, one had a lot of options of joining boards of companies, in a way doing something which is little more newsworthy and it sort of keeps you in the public profile. But consciously I decided that that's not something which I'm passionate about. I would rather try and build other entrepreneurs and help them build good sustainable companies. So that is really what I'm engaged in now. So we've started an early stage fund where we are investing to help build next generation entrepreneurs. So if you're passionate about something, age is only a number. At 63, I'm feeling very excited about my next innings.
Beautiful, beautiful. What better and what else could I have expected from such a lovely human being like you? And I'm sure there are going to be many who's going to get benefited with whatever you are starting. So congratulations, KK. Lovely to do that. You've seen so many shifts in the corporate world, and you've been one of the earliest proponents of digitalization, if I were to reflect. What do you see as the future for leaders in a very reimagined workplace like what we're going through currently?
I think there are two elements to this. One is the whole, your observation rightly of what impact digitization has on both enterprises as well as how societies function. Now, clearly, I think digitization has made the equality between the haves and the have-nots because you're able to deliver services to people without distinguishing them, which is why I think I was seeing the ability to train people on how they leverage digitization and make information and services accessible to everyone was a very important element, and it improves the quality of life for every citizen. But now if I were to juxtapose on top of it the current pandemic crisis, I think it's accelerated the adoption of digitization in a very substantive way. In fact, I read a research report which says that almost it has accelerated adoption of digital by 5 years, which now means that this is a trend which is here to stay. Yeah. So now if we look at what impact it has on leaders, I think it has tremendous level of responsibility on leaders. Starting from leaders need to see that everybody whom they're associated with have digital literacy because that's going to be the way of life. So they have the role of enhancing digital literacy. They have the responsibility of leading teams without the ability to build social capital, because it's not that I think work from home is going to disappear. It's going to be a way of life. So how do leaders really adopt to this new scenario where by having remote teams, they still are able to build social capital I think that's going to become very, very important. And lastly, how are leaders going to drive some of these technologies to see that these technologies are leveraged for social good? Because at the end of the day, the benefit of technology is to deliver social good and try and reduce the inequality. So, how do leaders really play a role in doing that is going to become extremely important.
Beautiful. So the grassroots of humanness is still so alive in you, and I can see so much of echo around digitalization that's going to be used back for society to get better, which is
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
humane reflection of a leader. So wonderful. Over several years, KK, I have seen you handle business inflections with so much poise, resilience, and vulnerability at the same time. So, what are one or two things that redefined you through these inflections?
See, I do believe that if you look at economies and business, it's never going to be always a smooth ride. You're going to have your highs and lows, which is true of organizations also. There are going to be the ups and the downs. And particularly if you look at the context of Mindtree, while I think in a 20-year period, yes, we are judged to be a successful organization. I think there were several times when there were periods of uncertainty, there were periods of doubt, there were periods of what you could call even would we survive this sort of challenge? Yeah. Be it the post e-commerce bust or the crisis which happened after the global financial crisis in 2009, or what I call a self-inflicted wound where we jumped into the smartphone business without understanding it well. But handling both challenging situations and success, organizations need to build a sense of responsibility, and how do you really in a even manner handle both success and failures is very important. And the ability to be transparent in both the successful environment and the failure is also important. Like I recollect, we had a lot of debate when we did realize that we had made errors in getting into the smartphone business. The ability to publicly acknowledge, yes, I think we did this wrong. And to that extent, yes, the markets really punished us. Organization went through what I would call a very low period. But one way of looking at that was internally, my message to the team was, we can't go down any further. This is really the lowest. From here, the only way is to go up. So I think being transparent at that time, more than anything else, retaining the self-confidence, yes, I think we have the ability to come out of the crisis is extremely important.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I think I have experienced transparent communication during my tenure at Mindtree, several years as a Mindtree mind. So I couldn't agree more. So we are now moving towards a very seamless geographical morphing. We are seeing this happening, especially in the current times, across industries and across cultures, if we were to reflect. And how do you think the role of leaders will evolve in ensuring that we sustain this kind of a geosynchrony that we are experiencing, KK?
See, my sense is in the new world, the extent of this geodiversity is probably only going to increase. It's interesting that organizations like Facebook have made a public pronouncement saying we don't need people to come to office. They can work anywhere they want, which is really the first I would say, vector of diversity where you could have a part of a team member sitting maybe in Taiwan or Cambodia, and one part of the team sitting probably in Latin America.
Mm.
So I think the ability to manage geographical diversity is important. And yes, technology plays a role in terms of trying to create that collaborative environment. But there's always a responsibility of the leader to understand the next level of diversity, which is really that people come in from different cultures, they have their own expectation nuances. So how do I really understand where they come from, and how do I really manage the diversity in a way where it's collaborative and productive to the whole team is extremely important, which is why I think the role of the leader to understand each person's uniqueness, each person's diversity, his culture, and what does he bring to the team is extremely important. Not only that, I think the world of future is also not going to be about permanent team members. I think it's really going to be people who could come in and go out. Right. So that almost sort of makes it important for the leader not just to look at his team, but even people whom you could call the so-called gig workers, who come in to provide their specialization and then get out of the team. So managing this diversity, I think, is a very important responsibility of the leader.
Wonderful. So I hear you say two things loud and clear. You touched upon a very major aspect of inclusivity, not only of cultures, but diversity of ideas, inclusivity of ideas and the like. And you also, kind of spoke about the importance of understanding a very collaborative culture that the leader needs to manage over time. So given this, I think we're also shifting to a very increasingly selfless world, if we can see. Several years ago, when we were talking about learning in organizations, it used to be quite a hush-hush affair when it came to capability within organizations. But today, that's also kind of becoming very selfless. You see, everything is available. Organizations have actually started talking to each other to exchange ideas in the space of learning in every context. And so how do you think, as a leader, one would involve or engage himself or herself when it comes to managing tacit knowledge that's becoming so much more critical, especially in the current scenario?
See, you touched upon a very important point of how do you encourage people to share tacit knowledge, which has always been the challenge for organizations. But think of it, a crisis like the COVID pandemic has essentially got people together. In fact, I find people are far more acknowledging others, seeing their viewpoint. In a way, an external crisis has driven people to become far more receptive. Part could also go in terms of saying that maybe some of our, what you could call performance systems, which used to drive individual excellence, was leading to people trying to compress or in a way protect their knowledge, because they said that if I give this away, I think I will lose out. I think there are two elements to it. One, I think an external crisis has taught us that we need to, in a way, think of others, be far more sensitive to others, and work in a far more collaborative way. So that change I see already happening in people, which has got influenced by an external threat. Now I think we need to work in terms of organizational reward systems process to drive a more collaborative behavior, where I think you recognize people who are the trendsetters of sharing tacit knowledge, people who demonstrate the ability to help others grow up. So I think our whole system of rewards recognition also need to change for this to get institutionalized in an enterprise.
Absolutely. And again, it leads us to a very humane approach of leadership. And I have experienced so much of it when I was at Mindtree, and wanted to ask, what is your thought about human-centric leadership in the world of today?
See, I think it's very important for a thing. It's not something new. I think people have always talked about the inverted pyramid.
Right.
I think the role of leadership is to serve people who are really serving the customers. I see more and more organizations adopting this in a more active manner. It's also important you start building this as a very essential fabric of your culture, because leadership has to walk the talk on saying it just doesn't mean by presentations and posters saying that, hey, we really serve people who serve customers. It has to be demonstrated by action. The fact is, I think high quality talent will tend to, in a way, migrate to organizations which have started embedding human centric approach as the way of how they work. Because increasingly we think in terms of organizations which are going to be far less hierarchical, organizations which are going to be more networked organizations rather than a command and control structure. So I think talent will also migrate to organizations which demonstrate their ability to function like this.
Beautiful. So, there's so much that you spoke about the need for human-centric leadership, which was existent, but it's going to re-emerge more powerfully given the kind of business ecosystems that are evolving, and the need for collaboration not only within organizations but across organizations, be it tacit knowledge or capability building. This leads me to a very different question, KK. Do you see the role of happy leaders in creating a happy workforce, given that you also spoke about fluid teams a few minutes ago?
See, if you look at human sort of research, I think it's by and large very clear that as people are more happy, their ability to perform to their potential really increases. So it's clear that there is a very strong correlation between leaders who learn to be happy and their ability to influence a happy workforce. Because the world of the future is not about leaders trying to, in a way, influence people to do what is right. Because the moment of truth for the customer is potentially going to be how the person who's interacting with him is reacting and empathizing with this problem and helping to solve it. And people will really demonstrate that level of customer centricity only if they are personally, in a way, not going through anxieties. They're pretty much, in a way, happy about what they're doing. But the ability to impact that is really on the organization and the leadership. So I see a very strong correlation between how people perform, their ability to be very customer centric, really on the way in which the organization perceives and really starts influencing the manner in which people come up with what are their anxieties, help sort of solving them. And countries like Bhutan have been outstanding on this. In a way, they measure the happiness index, and you see that they have a far more stable and healthy society. So that there is a connection between wellness and the state of mind, which is happiness, is clearly demonstrated.
So that's sheer brilliance. This makes me ask you a very tangential question again. I have always seen you smile through my years, in moments of crisis, in moments of joy. How have you been able to manage this?
No, I must say, see, many times, like I sort of shared with you earlier in this interaction, there will be always ups and downs. The point is your positivity and your ability to sort of see opportunities and problems is an inherent quality which you have to build in yourself. Because if the size of the problem or the complexity of the problem is going to drown you, then you're not really doing the right thing for as you as an individual and really to deliver the potential which you have. So many times if you see problems as opportunities, if you really see them as stepping stones for making you a better individual, a better person, I think you can in a way smile through problems.
Lovely, lovely. And, there's so much of a summary that I can see around inclusivity, around happiness, about leaders walking the talk, about values that leaders have to display, about collaboration, about interconnectedness, about business ecosystems. And all this leads to one important question. I've seen you play the role of a mentor to several leaders. And what is the importance of mentoring in organizations, especially in a scenario like what is being experienced today, not only by leaders but the whole organization, if we were to look at it?
No, I think that's a very important area, Amina, because depending on the context of the organization, sometimes it even becomes very critical. Again, if I had to go through my experience in Mindtree, after sort of moving from a direct day-to-day exec responsibilities in 2016, we brought in a number of senior leaders. And many times the idea was to really get the value of capability and experience of senior leaders who have built other large organizations and enable them to do that in the same Mindtree context. But organizations are also, in a way, unique human entities. Particularly when a senior person gets inducted into the organization, it is not easy for the person to really get accepted by the system.
Correct.
This is where I think the mentoring plays a very different role of helping them manage the organizational nuances, the way in which the organization works, and helping them find ways by which they can quickly get accepted within the organization. Now, so I see that as one part of the mentoring where there is also receptivity from the receiver. Because the person is new, he wants to sort of get accepted in the organization. And I did this for 4-5 leaders and it worked well because it was good for the organization, it's good for the individual over a 6-12 month period. They got assimilated extremely well into the company ecosystem and the culture. But there could be other types of mentorings. In a sense, sometimes I've mentored people who are going through a period of self-doubt or a performance crisis. That requires a little different mindset because the person itself is little uncertain. Many times it tends to come back with the thing saying, you know what, there's so much wrong about the system. That's not allowing me to perform and I'm being perceived as an underperformer. So how do you not in a direct manner try and tell the person saying, you know what, while yes, there might be 1 or 2 flaws in the system and no system is perfect, you have to learn to work with that. But what are things in which you can change and help them really understand that, yes, I think this is not the end of the world. How do they look at it more confidently and say, you know what, yes, now I'm in trouble, but I know I can get out of this trouble as I start thinking through how to solve it and make very concrete steps in terms of doing it. So that element of mentoring is very different from maybe enabling a senior person to sort of settle into the organization.
Absolutely.
But living around this, I think in an organization, entering at every level is important, because at the end of the day, the role of leadership is to really build their next line. Now, while I think, yes, today our organizations are hierarchical and leaders are expected to deliver results, but beyond results, I think the capability and future leadership potential which a leader is able to cultivate within his team, I think are much bigger indicators of how good a person can really grow. Because if he's not able to build other very potential people, capable people within his team, then I think he won't go very far. Yeah. So that way, I think the ability to mentor has to go right across the organization at every level.
Lovely. So you brought in aspects of mentoring where you spoke about not only being, not only used for assimilation of senior executives, but you also talked about holistic capability building that a mentor has the onus of. So I've seen you bring joy to people around you always. All through my quiet years in Mindtree, I have observed you from a distance, and everybody who approaches you walked back and walked away with a smile. So the question I have for you, KK, is what makes you happy?
One, I must be honest, in a way, I don't carry problems beyond a certain stage. The second thing is, when there is a problem, it's important that you acknowledge there's a problem. It's also important that you then start saying, you know what, whom can I tap into to solve this problem? The ability to seek help is very, very important. Because if you get, in a way, drowned by the problem and feel clueless in terms of how to solve it, then that really starts playing on your psyche. Your shoulders start hunching, and it sort of visibly you can see that something is bothering you. Whereas if you look at it as an opportunity, saying, you know what, I know that I'm in trouble now, but can I sort of seek advice from these 3, 4 people who might give me a couple of clues to get out of this, and how do I do that? I think that sort of an attitude is very important even when people come to you with problems, because many times it could happen that you may not know the answers, but the ability to be a very attentive listener to their problems, help them articulate and in a way pour out some of what you could even feel as wounds which they may have, is very important. And while you may not solve the problem, at least give them some thoughts in terms saying, you know what, have you considered this? Have you thought in terms of connecting with this person who might give you some thoughts in terms of solving this? Because at the end of the day, I think when you're really trying to help a person who's going through maybe a temporary phase of what I would call self-doubt, one, it's important to give a very attentive sort of mind to him. The second is to give him or make him realize, yes, there are other ways by which I can try and address the problem, which in a way you're helping him build his confidence that I think I can handle this. I think that's the most important role which you have to play.
So I think making others happy makes KK happy. That's how I can summarize it.
Yeah.
So lovely. So, on a closing note, is there one message that you would like to give leaders globally?
See, I think the role of leaders is changing. More and more, I think the people who are on the front end, they really know the customers more. So it's important for leaders to allow people to express what they see as issues with customers and how they would like to serve the customers better. Yeah. But clearly, the job of leadership is to simplify issues for their people. Because organizations today, as we grow, we have also become far more complex. So, the role of leaders is to simplify processes, remove bottlenecks for their teams, so that people can really do what they can really do and deliver at the highest potential. While doing this, the role of leaders is also to provide hope and optimism. Because again, if we take a scenario like today, I think if leaders don't provide hope and optimism to people, based in terms of what you read in the media and what you hear, people will get into a mode of mistrust and negative energy. So clearly, the role of leaders is to provide hope, optimism, and create an aspiration to everyone saying that, hey, I can win the world. I think that's really the role of the leader.
Beautiful. Hope, optimism, positivity, happiness, human-centric leadership, all of these that you spoke for the world is a true reflection of UKK. On that note, thank you so much for being part of this conversation today, and truly wish you the very best in your next big venture.
Thank you so much, Veena. Pleasure conversing with you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.